Welcome, friends, to another edition of Economic Update, a weekly program devoted to the economic dimensions of our lives. Jobs, debts, incomes, our own, those looming down the road, those of our kids. I'm your host, Richard Wolff. Carillion, I hope is the right spelling, Carillion Corporation. It's a 200-year-old company, employs 43,000 workers. That makes it a very big company. Out of those 43,000, 20,000, a little less than half, are in the United Kingdom. That company has, in fact, collapsed. It has been negotiating for bankruptcy. Compulsory liquidation was announced on January 15th. It may survive still. There are negotiations. But there's some important lesson in this collapse of a huge private construction company. First, the United Kingdom government had employed Carillion on 450 projects, including the construction and maintenance of hospitals, of schools, of prisons, of defense sites, and of high-speed railways. The government uses tax money to make all these contracts with Carillion Corporation. Now the government has promised to pay the salaries of many of these workers while they work out the financial collapse of this company. All kinds of other companies that provided services and inputs to Carillion are being damaged by the collapse of this large corporation. Why am I telling you this? The answer is, for years we've been hearing that outsourcing activities that the government used to do, the government itself used to build or at least run schools and prisons and defense sites and railways in England. These are outsourced. We were told that turning these over to private enterprises would give us a much more efficient production of these sorts of things and is the logical thing to do. Everybody knows, we heard all this, we hear it in the United States just the same. Well, turns out it isn't so. It turns out that one of the biggest beneficiaries of outsourcing to the private sector, what the British government does, has been a disaster. This company has failed. This company is leaving tens of thousands of people without work, thousands of companies without revenue. It is a disaster for all of England. And listen now as I quote to you what two observers of it all have to say. The first is the Institute of Directors, directors of companies. These are the people that are the kind of people that ran that corporation. It has issued, quote, a stinging rebuke to Carillion's top executives and directors. Wow. Roger Barker, head of corporate governance at the Institute of Directors, was particularly alarmed that the company changed its bonus rules to protect top bosses. Turns out that over the last year, as they were going down into collapse, they gave themselves big bonuses, these directors. Oh, goodness. Maybe nobody thought about what it might mean if you outsource government activity to private enterprise, that the private enterprise are just as capable of taking care of themselves at public expense as any politicians ever proved themselves to be. Well, if you didn't think about it, you can think about it now. And here's another comment. Meg Hillier, chairwoman of the Parliamentary Public Accounts Committee, fears that taxpayers face, quote, a raw deal from this collapse. Here's what she says. Carillion's collapse raises grave questions about jobs, the delivery of public services, and the way government conducts its business. We as a committee have previously warned of the risks when contractors paid from the public purse become too big to fail. They get a pass, they get too much money, they mess up. Why am I telling you this? Is it because I want you to believe that private isn't good and government is as the way to do business? And the answer is no, that's not what I'm doing. Liberals do that. I'm no liberal. I'm not here to tell you, have the private do it, it's better than the public, because that's silly. But I'm equally aghast at people who say, no, don't have the private do it, have the public do it. Because putting a bureaucracy of politics in charge is about as smart as putting a bureaucracy that's private in charge, which is what you do when you outsource it to big private corporations. The solution to these problems is not to have vertical controlled companies, neither public nor private. The solution to this kind of failure and corruption is to have many people involved in deciding what happens in a company, not a few, and to therefore also make sure that there are people to sound the alarm when things aren't going well, and to make sure that as things go badly, we haven't got a handful of people taking care of themselves at the top while everybody else suffers and the problem gets worse, which is what happens either publicly or privately. Let's not once again go from the public to the private, followed by the private to the public. We've been back and forth this way for decades, and it doesn't solve the problem. That's what the Carillon collapse teaches us one more time.